Page number 5, Unit 29, Constitutional Reforms 1921 to 1935, 1921 to 1935. Structure 29.0. Objectives 29.1. Introduction 29.2. Effects of the constitutional reforms of 1919 1919. 29.2.1. Failure of diarchy. 29.2.2. Reform proposals between 1920 to 1927, 1920 to 1927. 29.3. Simon Commission. 29.3.1. Appointment. 29.3.2. Boycott. 29.4. All Parties Conference and Nehru Report. 29.5. The First Round Table Conference. 29.6. Gandhi and the Second Round Table Conference. 29.7. Communal Award and Pune Pact. 29.8. The Government of India Act of 1935 1935. 29.9. Let us sum up. 29.10. Keywords. 29.11. Answers to check your progress exercises. 29.0. Objectives. The aim of this unit is to give you a brief history of the constitutional reforms during the period 1920 to 1935, 1920 to 1935. After going through this unit, you will be able to, number 1, know how the basic character of the Constitution of Free India, the Democratic Republic with a parliamentary system of government in brackets, has evolved gradually. Number 2, explain how the struggle for freedom and the constitutional reforms went together and were complementary to each other. And number 3, appreciate the efforts of Indian masses and their leaders in facing the challenge of communal and minority problems in relation to constitutional reforms. 29.1. Introduction. In Unit 17, Block 4, you have read about the constitutional developments during the period 1892 to 1920. In this unit, an attempt is made to familiarize you with the constitutional developments between the period 1920 to 1935. Here we analyze the effects of 1919 Reforms Act and the circumstances leading to the appointment of Simon Commission. The nationalist response to the appointment of Simon Commission as well as the recommendations of the Nehru Report are also discussed. It also takes into account the British initiatives for a compromise with the nationalists through the Round Table Conference. It also explains the nationalist overture in the form of Pune Pact to meet the challenge posed by communal and minority representation guaranteed by the British. Finally, the main features and limitations of Government of India Act of 1935 are enumerated. ENUMERATED, enumerated. 29.2 Effects of the constitutional reforms of 1919. Before discussing the effects of the constitutional reforms of 1919, let us briefly recapitulate recapitulate the main features of the Government of India Act of 1919. Under the Government of India Act of 1919, the provincial governments were given more powers under the system of diarchy. Some subjects such as finance and law and order, page number 6, were called reserved subjects and remained under the direct control of the governor. Other subjects such as education, public health and local self-government were called transferred subjects and were to be controlled by ministers responsible to the legislature. Although some of the spending departments were transferred, the governor retained complete control over the finances. The governor could overrule the ministers on any grounds which he considered special. The central legislature had virtually no control over the Governor General and his executive council. On the other hand, the central government had unrestricted control over the provincial governments. 29.2.1 Failure of diarchy. In actual practice, diarchy proved unworkable. The whole conception of diarchy was based on an erroneous erroneous principle. The division of state functions into watertight compartments proved illogical. There was no clear distinction between reserved and transferred subjects. For example, finance, a reserved subject, was important for the functioning of transferred departments. The ministers were interested in promoting the interests of their countrymen, whereas the governor, members of executive council and of civil service wanted to promote British imperial interests. Thus, the interests of ministers and members of executive council, governor, as well as civil servants never coincided. Ministers had no control over the civil servants through whom they had to work in the transferred departments. Ministers were responsible to the legislature and were subordinate to the governor, who appointed and dismissed them. Due to lack of organized political parties and stable majorities, joint responsibility of ministers was absent. There were discrimination in the allocation of finances to the reserved and transferred departments. The reserved departments were favored in this respect. Diarchy did not succeed in giving equal training to people in parliamentary system of government. Due to absence of organized political parties, there was no contact between the voters and the representatives. Members of legislature were divided on communal and local issues. They succeeded neither as supporters of government nor as its constructive critics. Healthy conventions which would have brought about constitutional progress did not emerge in the functioning of transferred departments. Ministers, legislators, and voters did not get sufficient training which would have enabled them to handle larger political responsibilities. Page number 7. 29.2.2 Reform proposals between 1920 to 1927. The reforms introduced by the Government of India Act of 1919 disillusioned the Indian nationalists and contributed to a great extent to the growth of nationalist movement in 1920 to 1921. During the period after the withdrawal of non-cooperation movement, a political vacuum developed which the Swarajists attempted to fill up. The Gandhian non-changers, on the other hand, concentrated on constructive work in villages. In the period between 1920 and the formation of Simon Commission, many reform proposals were put forward by the Indians. A non-official resolution was introduced in the Central Legislative Assembly in 1921. The resolution demanded establishment of full responsible government in the provinces. Two other non-official resolutions were introduced in 1923, but to no avail. After entering the assembly, the Swarajists introduced a non-official resolution. It recommended to the Governor-General in Council the overhauling of Government of India Act of 1919 to establish self-governing dominion status within the British Empire and provincial autonomy in the provinces. The government rejected this proposal. Home Member Sir Malcolm Haley pointed out that responsible government, as mentioned in the preamble of Act of 1919, in which executive would be responsible to the legislature with limited powers, was to be established. However, full dominion self-government was to be a further and final step. Swarajists led by Motilal Nehru introduced an amendment in 1924. They demanded the framing of an Indian constitution by an Indian Constituent Assembly. As a response, the government appointed the Reforms Inquiry Committee under the chairmanship of Sir Alexander Muddiman, the Home Member in the Executive Council. The committee published a majority and minority report. Majority report declared the diarchy had not been established. Minority report stated that Act of 1919 had failed. However, the official point of view stated that the Act of 1919 could be improved upon by adopting the suggestions of the majority report. But Motilal Nehru stood by his earlier resolution. He asked for the summoning of a round-table conference of all Indian, including minority in brackets, European and Anglo-Indian interests. Around this time, the Muslim League, under the presidentship of M.A. Jinnah, met at Lahore. It demanded the establishment of full responsible government, a federal constitution with full autonomy for provinces and adequate representation for minorities through separate electorates. When a resolution was introduced in the Council of State for the abolition of separate electorates, Muslim members felt that the moment for doing away, page number 8, with them had not come. Later, the Muslim members agreed to accept the system of joint electorates if 4 conditions were fulfilled. Number 1, Sindh, after being separated from Bombay Presidency, was to be made a separate province, Muslim majority province in brackets. Number 2, in NWFP and Balochistan reforms were to be carried out on the same lines as in other provinces. Number 3, representation in Bengal and Punjab was to be on the basis of population. This was to ensure Muslim majority in the legislature in brackets. Number 4, Muslim representation in central legislature was to be either 1/3 of the total or more than that. Jinnah played an important role preparing this list of demands. A resolution was passed by the Congress which accepted most of the demands put forth by the Muslims. Around this time, there took place a split in the Muslim League. A separate annual session of the League was held at Lahore under the presidentship of Sir Mian Muhammad Shafi. The split was compatible with British policy of preventing reapproachment between the Congress and the League. Against this backdrop, the British government decided to review the Indian situation in order to stem the tide of growing popular discontent in India. The result was the coming of the Simon Commission. 29.3 Simon Commission. The Act of 1919 contained provision for the appointment of a royal commission at the end of the 10 years after the passing of the Act with the aim of inquiring into the functioning of the government. The principle working behind this was that constitutional progress should be achieved gradually. However, this approach had certain drawbacks. A temporary constitution provided little incentive to people to make it successful, and those who were dissatisfied with it tried to prove that it was unworkable. Above all, a 10-year period was too short for any conclusions to be reached about the viability and workability of a constitution. 29.3.1 Appointment. Lord Birkenhead, Secretary of State for India, announced the appointment of a statutory commission under the chairmanship of Sir John Simon in November 1927. The aim of the commission was to inquire into the working of provincial governments, to examine how far the representative institutions were functioning satisfactorily, and to draft the outlines for the future progress in establishing responsible government. The Government of India Act of 1919 was implemented in 1921. Thus, the appointment of a commission was due in 1931. But then the question here is, why was it appointed earlier? British government declared that by this appointment it was being liberal to consider the problems of India, but in fact the reasons lay elsewhere. Number 1. Nationalist opinion resented the method of periodic inquiry and had been demanding a complete revision of the constitutional system. Number 2, the political situation in Britain compelled the Tory government to appoint the commission earlier in November 1927, 1927. In the general election due in 1929 in Britain, the Labour Party was expected to win. The Tory government was apprehensive about giving the Labour government a chance to make the appointment of the statutory commission in relation to India. Number 3, besides the Tory government wanted to send the delegation at a time when communal situation had deteriorated so that the commission should form a low opinion about the capacity of Indians to govern themselves. Number 4, another reason as suggested by Professor Keith was that the appointment was a result of the activities of the Swarajists Party on the one hand and the youth activities led by Nehru and Bose on the other hand. All the 7 members of the commission were Englishmen who were members of British Parliament. The British government gave 2 arguments for excluding the Indians from the commission. Page number 9. The first point. They pointed out that since the committee had to report its proceedings to the British Parliament, so it was justified to appoint British members only. This argument did not hold much weight because there were two Indian members of British Parliament, Lord Sinha and Mr. Saklatwala. Secondly, the British government declared that as there was no unanimity of Indian opinion on the problem of constitutional development, it was not possible to appoint any Indian as its member. Actually, Birkenhead was afraid that in a mixed commission there could be an alliance between the India and British Labour representatives. Irwin declared that Indians had been excluded from the membership of Commission because they could not give an accurate picture of their capacity to govern to the Parliament, and their judgment was bound to be coloured. However, Prime Minister Baldwin declared in May 1927, in the fullness of time, we look forward to seeking her India in equal partnership with the dominions quoted. Taking cognizance of Baldwin's declaration, Irwin made provisions for expression of Indian opinion on the problem of constitutional development. In India, joint committees consisting of non-official members from centre and provinces were to make their views known to the Commission. Indian legislature could send delegations to confer with the joint British Parliamentary Committee on the Commission's report. 29.3.2 Boycott. The announcement of the all-white commission shocked almost all Indians. It was agreed with strong protest by all parties, that is, the Congress, a section of the Muslim League, Hindu Mahasabha, Liberals Federation, etc., proving that on the issue of Indian representation there was unanimity amongst almost all sections of Indian public opinion. They pointed out that what they had asked for was a round-table conference of Indians and British and not an exclusive English commission. Through the boycott, the Congress tried to revive the non-cooperation spirit. However, Indian revolutionaries like Bhagat Singh and others opposed the Simon Commission on the ground that only Indians should have a say in framing the Constitution of India. The Muslim League, led by Muhammad Shafi, as also Justice Party in Madras, Central Sikh Sangh and All India Achut Federation did not oppose the commission. The Simon Commission reached Bombay on February 3, 1928 and was greeted with the slogan of "Go back, Simon" in quotes. A hartal call was given and thousands of people gathered to shout slogans. The boycott turned into a protest movement and the scenes of non-cooperation days were revived. Crowds could not be held back even by bullets and lathis. A procession led by Lala Lajpat Rai in Lahore was lathi charged and Lalaji succumbed to his injuries. Jawaharlal Nehru and G.B. Pant were lathi charged in Lucknow. A revolutionary group led by Bhagat Singh avenged Lala Lajpat Rai's death by killing Assistant Police Superintendent Saunders. The popular resentment against the commission reflected the feeling that the future constitution of India should be framed by the people themselves. The Congress called an all-parties conference in February 1928 and on 19 May appointed a committee under Motilal Nehru to draft a constitution. The commission paid 2 visits to India, February to March 1928, October 1928 to April 1929 in brackets. Each time it faced boycott, it made extensive tours and prepared a report which was published in May 1930. 29.4 All Parties Conference and Nehru Report. At the 1927 Madras Congress session, a resolution boycotting the Simon Commission was passed. The Working Committee was authorized to prepare a constitution for India in consultation with the other organizations. Congress representatives as well as representatives of other organizations such as Muslim League, Hindu Mahasabha, etc. met at a conference in February 1928. This came to be known as the All Parties Conference. This conference was presided over by Dr. M.A. Ansari. It was agreed that in framing the constitution of page number 10, India, the principle of full dominions, responsible self-government should be kept in mind. Although the 1927 Madras Congress session had adopted the goal of complete national independence, but at the All Parties Conference, full dominion self-government was declared to be the desired aim. This was done to rally all those organizations which aimed at dominion status behind a common plan. In May 1928, a committee was appointed with Motilal Nehru as president. The Nehru Committee, appointed by nationalists, was their response to the appointment of Simon Commission and the challenge given by Lord Birkenhead to Indians, asking them to frame a constitution on which the Indian opinion was united. The committee's report was adopted in August. At the Calcutta Congress session, it was stated that the report had contributed to a great extent in seeing India's political and communal problems. The committee's report was an outline draft of a constitution which was based on the principle of fully responsible government on the model of the constitution of self-governing dominions. The establishment of full responsible government was not to be considered as a remote but as an immediate step. Apparently, it was different from the principle of gradual advancement, which envisaged by the Act of 1919. This draft is commonly known as the Nehru Committee Report. It made the following recommendations. Number 1. India should have the same constitutional status in the British Empire as the other dominions, with Parliament having powers to make laws and should be known as the Commonwealth of India. Second, the Constitution should define citizenship and declare fundamental rights. Number 3, the legislative powers should rest with the king and bicameral parliament, and executive powers with the king exercisable by the governor general, and the same provisions should be made for the establishment of responsible governments in provinces in respect of governors and executive councils. And number 4, hierarchy of courts with Supreme Court at its apex be established. A complex problem which confronted the Nehru Committee was regarding the status of princely states. In 1927, the people of princely states formed the State People's Conference with the view to introducing self-governing institutions. This move threatened the interests of princes who sought the help of British in this matter. The result was the appointment of a committee under the chairmanship of Sir Harcourt Butler, which laid stress on preservation of princely states through British paramountcy. The Nehru Committee criticized the appointment of Butler Committee and stated that the rights and obligations of paramountcy should be transferred to the government of Commonwealth of India, and conflicts between Commonwealth of India and Indian states were to be referred to the Supreme Court. The Nehru Report contained virtually no federal features, in spite of the fact that the federal principle was introduced in the composition of the Senate. The provinces were not equally represented in it, and thus the federal principle was not really put into practice. Decentralization was carried to the same extent as in the Act of 1919. Residuary powers were vested in the center. The position of princely states in relation to center was not made clear. The committee considered the establishment of a federal constitution, but it did not take concrete steps to ensure its establishment. The importance of the report lie in the fact that it was the first expression of the organized opinion of the majority of the Indian leadership on the communal problem. According to Copeland, it embedded the frankest attempt yet made by the Indians to face squarely the difficulties of communalism. Quoted. The report stated that the only method of giving a feeling of security to the minority was to provide for safeguards and guarantees. The committee, in this respect, made three distinct proposals. Number one, the proposed constitution should provide for liberty of conscience and religion. Number two, on the principle of self-determination, the Muslim majority provinces should be given distinct politico-cultural identity, that is, Sindh was to be separated from Bombay Presidency and NWFP was to be given full provincial status. Number three, the principle of separate electorates should be rejected. The principle of separate electorates should be rejected and all elections should be conducted on the basis of just electorates subject to reservations of seats for Muslims at center and in provinces where they were in a minority and for non-Muslims in NWFP. Later, the committee made two traditional recommendations relating to the communal, page number 11, problem. Communal representation was to be considered after 10 years and Balochistan was to be given full provincial status. At the All Parties Convention held in Calcutta in December 1928, Jinnah demanded one-third representation of the Muslims in the central legislature. As this was not accepted at the convention, so he joined the groups led by Agha Khan and Muhammad Shafi. An All India Muslim Conference was held in Delhi on 1st January 1929 and it was passed a resolution emphasizing two principles. Number one, the first principle was that since India was a vast country with a lot of diversity, it required a federal system of government in which the states would have complete autonomy and residuary powers. Second, the second principle was that the system of separate electorates should continue as long as the rights and interests of Muslims were not safeguarded in the constitution. In March 1929, Jinnah put forward before the Muslim League a detailed account of Muslim demands known as 14 points. These demands suggested a total rejection of Nehru report because of two reasons. Firstly, a unitary constitution was not acceptable because it would not ensure Muslim domination in any part of India. A federal constitution consisting of a center with limited powers and autonomous provinces with residuary powers would enable the Muslims to dominate in 5 provinces: NWFP, Balochistan, Sindh, Bengal and Punjab. Secondly, the solution to the communal problem as suggested by Nehru Committee was not acceptable to Muslims. Jinnah did not want to do away with separate electorates. Within the Congress, the younger section led by Jawaharlal Nehru and S.C. Bose criticized the Nehru report because of its acceptance of dominion status. As has been stated earlier, that although the Congress was pledged to the goal of complete independence, which meant secession from the British Empire, but it made a compromise and accepted Dominion status as its goal in order to rally all parties behind a common plan. However, due to the opposition of the younger section, the Calcutta Congress Resolution 1928 added that if the British government did not accept the Nehru Report on or before 31st December 1929 or spurned it before that date, the Congress would start another mass movement. Lord Irwin showed no signs of taking some concrete steps in the direction of establishing full Dominion self-government as he had announced in his declaration of 31 October 1929. Therefore, the Congress declared on 31st December 1929 that the Nehru Report had ceased to be valid. In May 1930, the Simon Commission report was published. It did not recommend the establishment of either responsible government or diarchy at the center. Separate electorates were retained. It proposed reservation of seats for depressed classes. It recommended scrapping of diarchy in the provinces and establishment of responsible unitary government in provinces. It stated that in order to cope with the diversity of the country, the ultimate character of the Indian government had to be federal. It declared that at the establishment of responsible government at the center was to wait indefinitely, that is, it was to be established somewhere in the future. Simon Commission's observations regarding Dominion status were not very clear. It recommended that a Greater India consisting of British India and the princely states as a federal association was to be established in the future, but the clause of British paramountcy with Viceroy as the agent of paramount power in brackets was to remain. The report was rejected by almost all Indian parties, and the Indian masses enthusiastically participated in civil disobedience movement. Check your progress 1. First question. Discuss the background against which the Simon Commission was appointed in 1927. Answer in about 2 lines. Page number 12. Question number 2. Mark with a tick against the correct statement given below. When the Simon Commission was appointed, option A, Baldwin was the British Secretary of State. Option B, Birkenhead was the British Prime Minister. Option 3, Irwin was the Viceroy of India. Option 4, Labour Party was in office in Britain. Question number 3. Enumerate the main recommendations of the Nehru Report. Write in about 5 lines. 29.5. The first round table conference. Before the Simon Commission submitted its report and the Labour Party came to power in England, Lord Irwin's declaration in October 1929 disclosed the Labour government's intentions to draw a new constitution after ascertaining various shades of Indian political opinion at a round table conference to be held in London. 3 sessions of the Round Table Conference were held in London. The Indian National Congress did not participate in the first and the third sessions. When the preparations for holding the first Round Table Conference were underway, the Indian National Congress was deeply involved in the civil disobedience movement. The sections led by Sir Tej Bahadur Sapru and M.R. Jaikar were anxious for participating in the conference. It was, however, clear to everyone that no barleys or negotiations could be successful without the Congress. The government was anxious to secure participation of the Congress. Responding to the overtures of the government and persuasion of the Liberals, the Congress placed some preconditions for attending the roundtable conferences, which included recognition of India's right to secure at will and grant of fully responsible government, both in the provinces and the centre. These conditions were not acceptable to the British government, and it proceeded with the conference without the presence of the Congress delegation. The first session of the Roundtable Conference opened on 1-2 November 1930. In all, 8-9 persons were invited to attend the conference. Of these, 1-6 represented British political parties. The British Indian delegation comprised 5-8 members which represented various parties and interests in India. Among the prominent Indian public men who participated were: number 1, M.R. Jayakar, a Hindu Mahasabha leader; C.Y. Chintamani and T.B. Sapru, who represented the opinion of Liberals. Number 2, Aga Khan, Muhammad Shahi, Muhammad Alit, Fazlul Haq and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who represented various shades of Muslim political opinion. Number 3, Sardar Sampuran Singh as a spokesman of the Sikhs, B.S. Monji as a representative of the Mahasabha, B.R. Ambedkar of the depressed classes, and K.T. Paul of the Indian Christians. The British and the Anglo-Indian business interests were also represented. A contingent of 16 members consisting of rulers or their nominees represented the Indian princely states. Prominent among them were the representatives of states of Alwar, Baroda, Bhopal, Bikaner, Kashmir, Patiala, Hyderabad, Mysore, and Gwalior. In spite of the fact that the conference included some prominent leaders, luminaries, and page number 13, rulers. It was a gathering of men who could not be considered real representatives of the Indian people whose destiny the conference had to decide. Continuing from page number 13. In spite of this handicap, from the point of view of constitutional reforms, the conference took initiative in favor of two positive points. It recommended the formation of an all-India federation of the British Indian provinces and the Indian states. It also proposed to establish a responsible government at the centre with certain safeguards for the transitional period. However, to the disappointment of the nationalists, the period of transition was not clearly specified. The Roundtable Conference gave the impression of being a gathering of communalists and reactionaries. Anxious to secure the Congress participation, the British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald and the Viceroy of India unconditionally released the Indian leaders so that they could meet at the residence of the ailing leader Motilal Nehru and deliberate on the conditions on which the Congress could agree to participate in the next session of the Round Table Conference. 29.6 Gandhi and the Second Round Table Conference. In spite of the fact that the government stand did not show much change, Gandhi agreed to participate in the Second Round Table Conference after concluding a pact with the Viceroy, known as the Gandhi-Irwin Pact of March 5, 1931. During this period, revolutionary terrorism was in full swing and the communists were organizing the labor and strikes. Apprehensive of anarchy, Gandhi concluded a pact with Irwin. The Congress suspended the civil disobedience movement and it was decided that Gandhi would be the sole representative and spokesman of the Congress at the second session of the Round Table Conference. The Congress reiterated Purna Swaraj as its ultimate political goal. In the intervening period, the situation had, however, undergone a change. On 2-6 August 1931, MacDonald's Labour cabinet resigned and a new coalition government dominated by the Conservatives was formed under him. Wellington succeeded Lord Irwin in Delhi in April 1931. Sir Samuel Hoare, a leading Conservative, became Secretary of State for India. As a result of these changes, official attitude hardened. Most of the prominent personalities of the first session returned to attend the second session. There were, however, many new faces. Besides Gandhi, there were Muhammad Iqbal, a great poet, Madan Mohan Malviya, Mrs. Sarojini Naidu, and Ali Imam, great political leaders and nationalists. G.D. Birla, a capitalist, and S.K. Datta, a prominent Indian Christian. They were attending the conference for the first time. The second session ended on 1st December 1931 and made recommendations on the matters such as: Number 1, the composition of the Indian Federation. Number 2, structure of the federal judiciary. Number 3, the mode of accession of states to the federation. And number 4, distribution of financial resources. The Congress scheme tabled by Gandhi was the same as had been suggested earlier by the Nehru Committee report. The proceedings of the conference were bogged down by the communal issues. Gandhi was aware of the fact that the communal problem was so complex that it defied all immediate solutions. He suggested that the communal settlement be kept pending till the constitutional settlement had been arrived at. The suggestion not only displeased the representatives of the minorities but even hardened their attitude. The Muslim representatives insisted on separate electorates. The second session thus concluded in an atmosphere of bitterness and anxiety. 29.7 Communal Award and Pune Pact. Apprehending a fresh wave of national agitation, the government arrested Gandhi on 4th January 1932, that is, only a week after his arrival in India, and unleashed a reign of terror. The communal problem gripped the nation's attention. The Indian National, page number 14, Congress had formulated a definite plan on this issue which was based on a thinking opposed to that of the government. The Congress reiterated that the proposed constitution would include in the fundamental rights a guarantee to the minorities of protection of their culture, religion, and language. Resetting separate communal electorates, it insisted on the principle of universal franchise. In the meanwhile, on 16th August 1932, MacDonald announced the proposal on minority representation known as the Communal Award, which recommended: Number 1, to double the existing seats in provincial legislatures. Number 2, to retain the system of separate electorate for the minorities. Number 3, to grant weightage to Muslim in provinces where they were in minority. Number 4, to reserve 3% seats for women in all provincial legislatures except in the North-West Frontier Province. Number 5, to recognize depressed classes as minority community and make them entitled to the right of separate electorate. And number 6, to allocate seats to labor, landlords, and traders and industrialists. Gandhi reacted strongly to the proposal of granting the right of separate electorate to the depressed classes. He regarded the depressed classes as an integral part of Hindu society. He had pinned his hopes for the welfare in the firm belief that the Hindus would do full social justice to that section of society whom they had exploited for centuries and would fully integrate them within their field. To persuade the recalcitrant Ambedkar to accept his viewpoint on this question, Gandhi, then in the Yarwada jail, resorted to a fast unto death. In an anxiety to save his life, the Pune Pact with the following main terms was concluded between Gandhi and Ambedkar on 2-5 September 1932. Number 1. It was agreed to allot 148 seats to the depressed classes in the provincial legislatures as against 71 promised by the communal award. Number 2, it was promised that a certain percentage of seats allotted to the general non-Muslim electorate would be reserved for the depressed classes. Number 3, the Congress also accepted that adequate representation would be given to the depressed classes in the civil services. Number 4, the depressed classes represented by Ambedkar accepted the principle of joint electorate. 29.8 The Government of India Act of 1935. After the third roundtable conference, a white paper on the new Constitution of India was prepared. The white paper prepared by the British government contained three major proposals, namely federation, provincial autonomy, and safeguards which vested special powers in the central and provincial executives. As it fell far short of complete independence, the white paper was criticized and rejected by all the political parties of India. Published in March 1934, the white paper was submitted for consideration March 1935, the white paper was submitted for consideration to the Joint Parliamentary Committee at both the houses, which submitted its report on 22nd to November 1934, 1934. A bill based on this report was passed on 2nd August 1935, and after receiving the royal assent, it became the Government of India Act of 1935. Regarding the provincial part, the most significant points were: number 1, the introduction of provincial autonomy. For the first time, the Act recognized provinces as having separate legal entity. This was so designed as to give full freedom to provinces from the control of the central government except in certain specific areas. Number 2, diarchy in provinces introduced by the Act of 1919 was to be abolished. Number 3, separating Burma from India, the Act suggested the creation of two new provinces of Sindh and Orissa. Orders to this effect were issued on 3rd March 1936. Number 4, Act provided for introducing responsible government in all the 11 provinces, including Sindh and Orissa. Among them, Bombay, Bengal, Madras, the United Provinces, Bihar, and Assam were to have bicameral legislatures. The franchisee was based on property qualifications. The number of voters, however, increased from 5 million in 1934 to 30 million in 1935. There was no change in the principle of allocation of seats. Separate electorates and the system of weightage were retained. Page number 15. The governors in provinces were invested with special executive powers. They could exercise discretion in matters like law and order, interests of minorities and the people of backward areas, the protection of the British commercial interests and those of the rulers of states. The Act prescribed federal structure for the government of India. It was to compromise provinces and states with federal, central, and provincial legislatures. Diarchy was introduced at the center, and departments of foreign affairs and defense were reserved for the Governor General, and the subjects transferred to the elected ministers were subjected to safeguards. The central legislature was to consist of two houses. The Council of States, that is, the upper house, was to consist of 156 members from British India and 104 from the Indian states. Dominion status was not introduced by the Act of 1935. Therefore, the Act was an arrangement for the interim period of transition from responsible government to complete independence, and the provisions regarding the safeguards and special responsibility were also made for that period of transition. The Act of 1935 was based on two basic principles, namely federation and parliamentary system. Although the federation principle was introduced with a built-in unitary bias, yet the provinces were invested with a coordinate and not a subordinate authority. No doubt the federal character was seriously distorted by the provisions of safeguards and special responsibility, which gave extraordinary powers to the executive head at the center and the provinces. An important point to be noted is that fully responsible government was not introduced at the center. The provincial autonomy envisaged under the Act was also placed under serious limitations. The dominion status for India was still a distant dream. The incorporation of safeguards was a clever constitutional device to delay the introduction of a fully responsible government. Although these provisions were made for the transition period, the extent of the period of transition was not defined. The Indian National Congress rejected the provision of safeguards and repudiated repudiated the idea of transition. It suspected that there were sinister motives behind them, and they were found to have an adverse effect on the national movement. The Act was criticized and rejected by the Congress on the ground that in formulating it, the people of India were never consulted, and as such, it did not represent their will. Congress charged the government of formulating the Act in such a way as to stall the introduction of responsible government, perpetuate, perpetuate their rule and exploit the Indian masses. In spite of its recognition of the aspirations of the Indians to have a responsible government, the Act of 1935 did not fulfill those aspirations. It did not concede the right to vote to all the adults. The property qualifications, the system of separate electorates, the provisions of safeguard were violative of democratic rights of the people. The Act was therefore denounced as undemocratic in spirit, offensive to people's sovereignty, and institutionally unworkable. The Liberals criticized the Act but were willing to work the reforms as a step towards responsible government. The Muslim League also criticized the Act but was ready to give it a trial. On the whole, the Congress condemned the Act but hesitated that they might be prepared to work the provincial part under protest. Thus, the Congress participated in the election in 1937 and formed provincial ministries. Check your progress 2. Question number 1. What were the main provisions of the Pune Pact? Answer in about 5 lines. Question 2. Mark with a tick against the correct statement given below. Option A, Mahatma Gandhi was the Congress nominee in the first round table conference. Option B, the Congress participated in the third round table conference. Option 3. Pune Pact was signed between Gandhi and Ambedkar. Option 4. Communal award aimed at abolishing minority representation. Page number 16. Question number 3. Discuss the main features of the Government of India Act of 1935. Answer in about 10 lines. 29.9. Let us sum up. We have seen in this unit how during 1920 to 1935 certain advances were made in relation to constitutional reforms. The British had their own notions of reforms which were challenged by the Indian nationalists. However, there was a section of Indians like the liberals which wanted to go ahead with the reforms the way they were offered by the British. The nationalists gave only conditional support to these reforms. This in no way compromised their stand vis-a-vis the British for the demand of freedom. It is from this point of view that we have to understand the attitude of constitutionalists within the Indian National Congress. The nationalists' forces had to face the challenge of communal representation, the position of princely states, etc. No doubt, these constitutional reforms, with all the limitations, helped India move towards parliamentary democracy. 29.10. Key words. Dominion status. A system of government according to which a country is granted self-government by the colonial power that continues to owe allegiance, allegiance, allegiance to the colonial power. Diarchy, a form of government which there is a division of the functions of state into two parts. Diarchy, a form of government in which there is a division of the functions of state into two parts. Here, some subjects such as education, health, etc. were transferred to elect representative, whereas other subjects such as finance, law and order, etc. were reserved for the official bloc. Note changers, a group of leaders within the Congress who opposed council entry. Separate electorates, grouping of constituencies on the basis of religion, community, etc. 29.11. Answers to check your progress exercises. Check your progress 1. Number 1. Your answer should include the following points. Dissatisfaction of the nationalists with the poultry reform of 1919, political activities of Swarajists, political situation in Britain, etc. See subsections 29.2.1 and 29.2.2. Number 2. Option C. Number 3. Your answer should include the following points. India should be given dominion status within the British Empire. The Constitution should define citizenship and declare fundamental rights, etc. See section 29.4. Check your progress 2. Number 1. Your answer should include the following points. Seats were to be allotted to the depressed classes in provincial legislatures. Representation was to be given to the depressed classes in civil services, etc. See section 29.7. Number 2, option C. Number 3, your answer should include the following points. The Act introduced provincial autonomy. Diarchy in provinces was abolished by this Act. It prescribed federal structure for the Government of India, etc. See section 29.8.